When working with collections, it is recommended to start with definition of arrays in Java. In this video, I'm going to describe what is an array, how to declare and initiate an array, how to use the utility methods to work with the arrays efficiently. Then I will demonstrate creating and using the arrays, including a multi-dimensional arrays too. Array is an object that contains a fixed number of elements of the same type. When you create an array, you need to indicate its size. If you later change your mind, you cannot resize an existing array. Only way to achieve increase in array size is to create a new array. Arrays can be made of different data type values, including primitives and objects. For example, you can create an array of primitive integers, also strings, or any other object types. But each element in the array has to be of the same type. You cannot have an element with string value mixed in the array made of integer values. Arrays are indexed and first index starts from 0, so the index of the first element of the array is 0, and the index for the last element equals array length minus 1. If you try to access an element with non-existing index, the array index out of bounds exception will occur. To declare an array, the following syntax is used. Let's say you need to declare an array of primitive integers and name it simply array. You type int with square brackets, space, and the name of the array object variable, in this case array. There is another way of declaring an array where you type int space the name of the array followed with square brackets. Both of these declarations will work, but most Java programmers prefer the first way because it visually separates the type int with square brackets from the variable name. After declaring the array, in order to use it, we need to initialize it. One way to initialize is the following syntax, where we have an equality sign and the values of the array separated with commas, enclosed with curly braces. In this type of declaration, we do not explicitly set the size of an array, but it still has a fixed size. In the second way of declaration, we use new keyword followed by int, square brackets, and the size of the array inside them. We can also declare an anonymous array with the following syntax. This can be useful in certain situations where we need to create and pass the array to some other method as an argument on the fly. It is completely okay to have an array of size 0, and please take in mind that size 0 does not mean that the array is null. Let's say we have an array of integers, primitive integers, and let's call it numbers, and let's populate it with 1, 3, 5, 7, 10, 5 numbers, and let's try to print these array elements using system.out.println. So if we run this application, we can see that there is no result containing the numbers. So in order to display and print each item from the array, we can either do for each loop and do for each int integer out of numbers array, system.out.println integer. Now if we run this program, we can see that we get printed elements for this array. Another much more shorter way to print all of the array elements is to use utility class called arrays toString method. So we pass this numbers array and let's wrap it up using system.out.println. So move this closing parenthesis and semicolon and run it again. And as we can see, the elements of the array are printed in an organized manner. Let's do another example and create such kind of situation where we have this array of primitive integers called numbers, but we have not defined any array elements. We are just indicating besides that it contains 5 elements, but none of them are defined. So if we do the same thing and call system.out.println arrays toString numbers, and if we run this application, let's see what we get. We can see that if no elements are provided, not set, in this case, primitive integers will default to 0. But what will happen if this same array, let's call it different, maybe integers, different name, so it will be object type now, uppercase I integer. So this will be the array of integer class, not the primitives. And let's see what happens for class types. Temporarily, we can just comment out this line of code and run the program again. As we can see now, object values, since they are not defined, they default to null. Now let's see one more experiment in case of primitive booleans, and let's call it values equals new boolean 3, and try to print the same array elements but for primitive booleans. And now, also like before, we can see that boolean values are not set. We just indicated the sites, like before. As we can see, for primitive booleans, if the values are not provided, by default they are false. In Java, we can also create arrays with more than one dimension. For example, on this picture, we can see that we got a table with dimensions 2 and 2. So we have 2 rows and also 2 columns. We can represent this table using array. In order to do this, we need to create an array with 2 dimensions. And in this case, we are going to use integers. So it will be int, then square brackets, but we will have 2 pairs of square brackets. Let's call it table equals new int and 2 pairs of square brackets. So first pair of square brackets will be for rows. In this case, it will be 2, and also another pair of square brackets will be for columns. So columns in this case are also 2. After defining this array, we need to set the values. So let's say first row and first column will have the value of 0. Then first row and second column will have the value of 1. Second row, in this case it will have index 1, and first column with index 0 will have the value of 2, and table 1 1, which means that we are creating the value for second row and second column, will have the value 3. Now let's print and display this table visually. So in order to do that, we are going to use 2 for loops. Int I equals 0, I is less than table length, I plus plus. And inside of it, we need a nested loop. So it will be j equals 0, j is less than table. But note that currently I'm indicating table 0 length, because in this case we need the length of the columns. In the outside loop, we will have the length of rows, but in the inside, we need length of the columns. Now I will do j++, and we can call system.out_print, not print line, because we need to print on the same line the items which belong to same row. So it will be table ij, and for visual representation, let's just create some space. After the row will be printed, we need to get some line, new line, system out print line. Let's run this program now and see what happens. So now we can see that our table is printed using Java code. We can use multi-dimensional arrays in many different situations based on the requirements of the software. Now that we have a general understanding of arrays in Java and how they work, in the follow-up video we can discuss an implementation of list data structure which is based on array, and it's called ArrayList.